Well, today's reading is filled with many great words for us. We see in Deuteronomy 16:3 where the unleavened bread is called the bread of hardship and reminds us of the Lord's broken body on the cross. We see in Deuteronomy 16:16 where the Israelites were required to appear before the Lord 3 times a year. We see in chapter 17 and verse 1 where they were to give the best, not the least, but to give their best to the Lord. In chapter 18, verse 15 through 18, we see that there would be one that would be a prophet like Moses that would come, who is Jesus Christ. We see in Deuteronomy 19 that the cities are to be set up as cities of refuge. And we see in Deuteronomy 19:15 that there are to be multiple witnesses in order to convict and not just one. And so there's a lot of great words that just pour out to us and show us and point us to Jesus Christ. But I want to focus on another part today, and that is the discussion in Deuteronomy 17 about appointing of a king for Israel. So let me read to you Deuteronomy 17, verse 14 through 20. When you enter the land the Lord your God has given you, take possession of it, live in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations around me. You're to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. Appoint a king from your brothers. You're not to set a foreigner over you or one who is not of your people. However, he must not acquire many horses for himself or send the people back to Egypt to acquire many horses. For the Lord has told you, you are never to go back that way again. You must not acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart won't go astray. He must not acquire very large amounts of silver or gold for himself. And when he is seated on his royal throne, he is to write a copy of this instruction for himself on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priest. It is to remain with him, and he is to read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to observe all the words of his instruction, and do these statutes. Then his heart will not be exalted above his countrymen. He will not turn from the command to the right or the left, and he and his sons will continue reigning many years in Israel. And so we see here that the king is called to write on his own copy. He's called to write his own copy of the Lord's instruction. And he cannot claim then that he did not know God's word if he copies all of it. And this exercise was to help him to learn and to know God's word so that he could follow and obey God's word. We see it in the Old Testament that many of Israel and Judah's kings were considered evil by the Lord. And I imagine that they did not obey this one command to copy out the Lord's word. Imagine if our politicians did that today. Imagine if you went to Washington or went to the Mississippi State House there in Jackson, if they had to write their own copy of God's word and keep it with them and refer to it. What kind of place would this be? It'd be so much better, wouldn't it, if they knew and followed and obeyed God's word? But you know what? The world would be a better place if you and I and everyone else did that same thing. And like the kings, we need to know his word so that we can follow and obey God's word. We may need to write our own king's copy, but regardless, we need to know and follow God's word. Hope you join me again tomorrow as we continue in Deuteronomy.